There's a new government in town with big promises for change. 2016 will be the first full year with Justin Trudeau's Liberals in power. So which issues should Canadians be keeping an eye on in the new year? Political analyst Scott Reid joins us to discuss. Always good to see you.
Good to see you.
So the economy was something that we heard a lot about during the election, and we're going to continue to, and we have.
Absolutely. But, you know, Justin Trudeau won the election, in my view, on two things: change and economic growth.
Yeah.
Well, we've had a big dose of change since he came to office. We get change almost daily from this government. They've been very pronounced, very in your face, very out there. But we haven't seen as much focus on the economic storyline. That will change in the new year. You're going to see a budget in February. Prior to the budget, you're going to hear this government start to roll out its notion of where it wants to go on the economy. And here's the thing, Marcy, the economy is in real trouble. We've got record lows with respect to oil prices. That makes us poorer as a nation. Our dollar is, you know, it's going down like a blind roofer, as they say. This thing is
household
tough.
Debt.
So when you look at it and you say, well, where will growth come from? Most of the economic forecasts, less than 2% growth. I don't think you're going to see the governor of the Bank of Canada raising interest rates, so the dollar is going to continue to stay low. So what is the recalibration that the Liberal government will put in place to say to people, here's what you can expect in terms of economic growth. This is where it will come from. This is how long it's going to take to get us out of this sluggishness. I think that's going to be the number one thing to watch. The number one thing that people at the end of the day will care about is whether or not things are getting better or worse for them economically.
And it's interesting, during the election we heard a lot about the middle class. Not so much right now.
Well, you know, and that's interesting, and I think they're conscious of that. As I talked to some folks in the Prime Minister's office just prior to Christmas, they said, look, you know, we had a really busy fall. They came out, they didn't walk, they sprinted once they came into office, and they had the Syrian refugee crisis. They brought back the House, they passed the tax cuts. So I think they realize that agenda items dictated that there was less of an emphasis and less of a reinforcement of that middle class theme. I expect to hear that change in the new year, and the budget really is the anchor of that message track. So rewarding the middle class, fighting for the middle class, making certain that people feel that this government is on their side when it comes to improving and growing the middle class. That's the number one challenge for this government. If it loses sight of that, then the whole thing starts to fall to threads.
ISIS also very much on the radar.
Very much so. And so that's an issue that has dominated the Prime Minister since he came into office, with all of his foreign travel. Lots of questions about what would the nature and what would the scope of the Canadian mission be. We saw him again in his interview with Lisa, indicating, look, we are going to pull our fighter jets. We are going to continue to train. We'll do some refueling services. But he also indicated that we're still in discussions with our allies as to exactly what the scope and the size and the nature of our engagement with the allied effort will be. There will be a pronounced effort in terms of working with our allies in the fight against ISIL. But what exactly it will be, how far it goes, and then, of course, there's the other question. There's the home front question. You know, God forbid, but we all have to keep our eye in this day and age on the home front. Will we see another attack on the United States soil in Canada? That's the number one priority for the government when it comes to this issue, which is making certain the Canadians stay safe.
We spoke to interim Conservative leader Rona Ambrose a little while ago. We're going to run that interview tomorrow, Scott. But let's focus on the Conservative Party in a rebuilding mode. Who is the person to watch during that rebuild?
Jason Kenney. And I say that because over the last number of years, you talk to anybody connected with Canadian politics and certainly Conservative politics, they'll tell you that Jason Kenney has really built up a sort of network and national infrastructure that is second to none. He alone has built up the Conservative network among, you know, large numbers of new Canadian communities. So we're talking about Chinese communities, we're talking about Southeast Asian communities. And he really has the key to who's going to win the Conservative leadership. And the big question that's on the minds of every single Conservative, particularly those that are thinking about running for the leadership, is Jason going to be a candidate, or is he going to be someone that hands the crown? And I think it's going to be really interesting to watch. The most and first important decision that comes with respect to the Conservative leadership race is, does Jason Kenney decide that he's going to be a candidate or not? My guess is he'll decide, I'm not going to be a candidate, but you can bet whoever he chooses to back, if that's the way he goes, will be the front runner for the Conservative leadership.
And just a teaser for that interview tomorrow, it was interesting, Ms. Ambrose alluding to what she called outside candidates, outside the party,
yeah.
that could be, you know, a potential leader outside.
Here in Toronto, we saw a front page of the Toronto Sun one day speculating that Caroline Mulroney, daughter of the former Prime Minister, was on here on the show just before Christmas.
Yes.
We saw her. You know, maybe she would run. Now, I'm not certain that she's really taking it, but that's actually the fun part of this. I mean, the Conservatives haven't had a lot of fun over the last number of months, but being able to speculate, muse, stir up the water and say, you know what, maybe we'll get a couple of high-profile, real exciting, high-quality candidates like a Caroline Mulroney, other people from other walks of life. And that's the kind of thing they need to stir up. That's the kind of thing that the Conservatives need, because it is got to be a process of renewal. It can't just be a process of replacement.
And just very, very quickly, a quick word on the Senate.
I think if there's an issue to watch, a sleeper issue for the new Liberal government, it will be the Senate. Remember, 2 years ago, Justin Trudeau cut the Senate caucus loose. They no longer sit as Liberals. Well, now they're effectively the government Senate caucus, except they don't sit in caucus. And they are in strong negotiations with the Senate. How will they pass legislation? What is the relationship between the Prime Minister, his caucus, and the Senate caucus? How do you get legislation passed? It may be dead boring to us, but we still have a bicameral parliament. The Senate exists. Some of us might think we should burn the place down, but it exists, and he's got to work with those former Liberal senators to get legislation passed. That's going to be something to watch.
Happy New Year, Scott.
Happy New Year to you.